Okay, friends, in this little mini lecture, we're going to talk about gut health. And unless you've been living under a rock, you know that we found out a lot recently about how important our gut is to our health. There is tons and tons and tons of clinical evidence out there now that links gut dysfunction to numerous different diseases and disorders. So one is allergic diseases like asthma, eczema, and food allergies. Also autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, celiac disease, fibromyalgia. Neurological illnesses and mood disorders like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, even depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, things like OCD, autism, ADD, and anorexia. It's also linked to cardiovascular disease, hypothyroidism, inflammatory bowel diseases like your Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. So our gut is basically our gastrointestinal tract. It's a closed loop from our mouth to our anus, and it includes the stomach, small intestine, and large intestine, also known as the colon. All of the things that it does include digestion, and in digestion, that's where we produce all the stomach acid, enzymes, and bile needed to break down our foods. And then it's responsible for nutrient absorption and delivery of those nutrients. Absorption and delivery mostly occurs in the small intestine. We have little microvilli, little hairs, cells at the edges of the small intestine that grab those nutrients and absorb them into the bloodstream. Then the gut's also responsible for detoxification, particularly solid waste. And then fat-soluble toxins get put into the lymphatic system for removal. We have specialized lymph nodes in the small intestine. They're called Peyer's patches, and they're part of what's called the gut-associated lymphatic tissue. Then the gut, we also know now, is involved in immune function. So we know that the gut produces antibodies, produces natural killer cells, produces B and T cells, and those with the natural killer cells are really important to fight off pathogens. And then the gut also helps teach the immune system when to react. And then the gut also is involved in endocrine and neurological function. So we know the gut produces certain hormones that affect our appetite, when we get full, when we feel full, how long we stay full, also our metabolism. And then the gut also produces neurotransmitters, help our cells talk to our brain. A big part of the gut is what's called the microbiome. The microbiome resides mostly in the large intestine, somewhat in the small intestine. It's essential to physical and mental health, and it is a collection of microorganisms. These could be bacteria, they could be fungi, they could be protozoa, they could be viruses, all residing down there in our gut. There are hundreds of strains of these little microorganisms, and they actually outnumber our cells by 10 times. So there's trillions of them, all chugging around down there. Some are neutral, some are harmful, some are beneficial, and that balance is extremely important. The beneficial bacteria actually help synthesize those B vitamins as well as vitamin K. And we know from studies that from person to person, that microbiome can actually vary quite a bit. The diversity of structure and function of these microorganisms is very different. Some of the things that affect that are our heredity or genetics, whether we were raised in the farm versus a city, our body fat percentage, the method of birth, which means if we were born via vaginal birth or C-section, and then our nutrition source, meaning whether we were breastfed or not. So those things can affect the microbiome. And then, of course, our diet and lifestyle, which we have a lot of control over. So what is leaky gut? That's another thing that started cropping up several years ago, and doctors kind of poo-pooed it, and now we kind of recognize it's a true thing. Leaky gut is the common term for what we call intestinal permeability, and that is when the normally tight junctions of our intestines become inflamed and they separate. When they separate, that allows bacteria, viruses, toxins, undigested food particles all to leak through the intestine and get into the bloodstream. That leads to malabsorption, malnutrition, infections, and autoimmune disorders. So one thing we've figured out is that chronic inflammation is the largest contributing factor to leaky gut. It just stretches out those junctions and causes those junctions to open. Other contributing factors include exposure to certain toxins or chemicals that are in our food supply and environment, certain medications, consumption of excess sugar and or excess alcohol, a bacterial imbalance like SIBO or Candida, and stress. So what should we eat to support our gut? Well, for digestion, we need adequate amounts of protein. We need our food to have those B vitamins because they're coenzymes for a lot of the cellular functions. And we need foods that stimulate our digestive fluids like gastric acid, digestive enzymes, and bile. For detoxification, we need fiber, both insoluble and soluble fiber. That helps to capture and move the toxins and waste material through the system. If we're not having enough fiber in our diet, then basically those toxins get reabsorbed. Icky, icky, don't want that. And then we also need foods that support glutathione. That is the key antioxidant nutrient needed for both phases of detoxification. And some of the foods that support glutathione production include salmon, eggs, grass-fed liver, whey protein, avocados, leafy greens, and then sulfur-containing foods like garlic, onions, and cruciferous vegetables. Those foods are also going to be providing the cofactors. We need B2 and selenium, as well as adequate protein, so that we can make the enzymes that we need to make glutathione. So for our immune system, we need to feed it with prebiotics and probiotics. Prebiotics are non-digestible, fermentable foods that the beneficial bacteria feed on. And then probiotics are those beneficial bacteria. And we're going to talk a little more about both of those in a bit. What we want to avoid, because we know chronic inflammation is the main trigger here, so we want to avoid inflammatory foods. Those include gluten, which is actually inflammatory to about a third of the population. That includes people who are not celiac. Includes trans fats. Most of our processed foods are inflammatory. We've already talked about excess sugar and alcohol, and then artificial sweeteners. Genetically modified foods we want to avoid, and you need to look for I've got a whole presentation thing on GMOs, so take a look for that. And then we also want to avoid toxins that are in our food supply and our food packaging. We also need to drink lots and lots and lots of clean, pure water. So if we are having frequent symptoms, things like abdominal pain, gas and bloating, cramping, we have a lot of allergies or food sensitivities, we have a lot of mental fog, we have mood swings or fatigue, then those are signs that we might have a gut issue. And we can follow a process of 5 R's to resolve our gut issues. So the first R is remove. You want to eliminate those common food allergens or triggers from the diet for at least 4 weeks. And that 4 weeks is important from a timing perspective. A couple of reasons. We've got the IgG antibodies, which have a half-life of 21 to 28 days that are triggered by those food triggers, and we want to make sure those get a chance to flush from our system. And then 28 days is typically the turnover for replacing the cells in our digestive lining. So some of those trigger foods are gluten, soy, dairy, eggs, legumes, corn, sugar. And then if you're also experiencing frequent arthritis, joint pain, then you might want to eliminate nightshade vegetables, which is things like tomatoes and eggplant and potatoes. Now, you may not have any of these food triggers, but chances are you have at least one, and you certainly probably won't have all of them. So you'll get a chance to put these yummy foods that you want back in your diet after you've figured out if they're a trigger. So just for 4 weeks, you want to remove them. Then we also want to replace those digestive fluids. So typically when we have gut dysfunction, we also have low levels of stomach acid. We have pancreatic enzyme insufficiency. We don't produce enough enzymes. We don't produce enough bile, which is needed to break down fats. So we can use supplements or foods that stimulate the production of these to replace those so that our digestion is getting back to normal. We also want to replenish those probiotics, those good bacteria, and we also want to include prebiotics, so those probiotics have something to eat. So here is a list of prebiotic foods, a big list, includes lots of good things. You can find something you like on here. Leeks, garlic, onions, dandelion root or leaf, chicory root, which has inulin, apples, artichokes, asparagus, bananas, coconut, flaxseed, seaweed, radishes, sweet potato, hemp seeds, cabbage, berries, manuka honey. Those are all prebiotic foods. And then your probiotics are typically going to be found in fermented foods. Things like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, some types of kombucha. You want to watch it with the kombucha because sometimes it has a lot of added sugar, which we don't like. Then the fourth R is repair. So we want to restore and repair the integrity of our intestines. Now that's 4 R's. So the fifth R is rebalance, and we do that through some key lifestyle practices. First being sleep. Most adults need a good 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep every night. We want to manage our stress because we saw that stress can contribute to leaky gut. We want to perform daily movement. And here I'm not talking about going out and exercising, running, anything strenuous, just even light daily movement. Make sure you're just getting up a few times a day and you're not sitting around being sedentary all day. Then some other lifestyle practices we need to look at are reducing toxins in our environment. And this can include outside like lawn care, inside like home cleaning products, your personal care products, like what's in your shampoo, what's in your soap, laundry products, anything that's kind of in your environment touching you or the things that you touch. You want to be aware of any toxins in there. We can practice mindful eating. Excuse me. And this is where we basically make sure that we're eating our meals in a relaxed physical and mental environment. You want to chew your food thoroughly. Don't rush through the meal. Enjoy your food. It's going to be good. Then avoid large, heavy meals. Try to eat equal meals throughout the day. And avoid eating 2 hours prior to bedtime. This is important because when you're sleeping, that's when your whole body, and especially your digestive system, is repairing. So if it's focused on digesting food that you've just eaten, then that takes its attention away from repair. So that's one reason that's important. The other thing we can do is practice intermittent fasting. This is proven to be very good for our guts and very good for our immune systems. And this is a practice, it's also called time-restricted eating, if you've seen that. It's basically setting a window every day where you don't eat. So you set a time every day of, I'm going to eat within this 8 or 10 or 12 hour period, and then this other 10 or 12 or 14 hour period, I'm not going to eat. 12 to 14 hours is recommended, and that can include the time you're sleeping. So, like for me, that means that I eat breakfast around 10, I finish dinner around 7:30. So I've got that 12 to 14 hour window where I'm not eating anything, and that allows my digestive system to kind of rest, relax, repair. And there are also several nutrients and phytonutrients, herbs, foods that we can use that have gut healing properties. The aloe vera is one. The inner gel of aloe vera is very soothing, very healing, very moisturizing. And the outer leaf is astringent, which astringent compounds tend to tighten. And if you think about it, we got loose junctions in our intestine. They do need to be tightened. So you can probably find an aloe vera solution that has both the inner gel and the outer leaf. L-glutamine is a non-essential amino acid. We can get that from foods like fish, other seafood, red cabbage, dairy, eggs, nuts and seeds, soybeans, dark leafy greens, red kidney beans, seaweed, and then meat or poultry. Manuka honey is basically honey from a manuka tree. Fulvic minerals are minerals that are from soil that has a high content of fulvic acid. They've been found to be very gut healing and good for the immune system and brain function. Different herbs that are also astringent and moistening include slippery elm, marshmallow root, plantain, calendula, and chamomile. You can use those as teas. Coconut oil, collagen and or bone broth are also good alternatives. And then colostrum. Colostrum is the first form of breast milk released by the mammary glands after giving birth, and most of your supplements are going to be a powder, and you want to look for grass-fed sources of that. So one thing you'll notice about a lot of these is they're not capsules. They're liquids that you can drink, they're foods that you can eat, they're herbs you can put in teas, they're powders you can dissolve in water. And that's important because if you've got a compromised gut, then you're going to be less likely to be able to break down those capsules. We want to be able to deliver these nutrients to heal as easily as possible. The other thing you want to remember is that different approaches work better or worse for different people. So I've had clients they did really well with like an herbal tea. Other clients didn't. They did better with like a fulvic mineral or an aloe vera. Personally for me, colostrum was the thing that, put me over the edge and made the most difference for me. So if you try one and it doesn't seem to be working, don't get frustrated. Try something else. There are plenty of different approaches out there, and not everybody's going to work the same. So to recap, gut dysfunction is linked to many diseases and disorders, and our gut is responsible for a lot more than just digestion. The microbiome, all those little bugs running around, are a key component of our gut. Leaky gut is a very common condition. It is also linked to many health disorders. And we can support our gut with proper nutrition. We can use the 5 R's if we have gut issues. And there are plenty of supplements and botanicals out there that can help us to heal our gut. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you learned something from this presentation. Take a look out there for some of the other presentations that I have, and see you next time.